I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to Generationally Speaking. Here at the table, we come and we discuss life issues, no matter what they might be. As we sit at the table with each generation, we all learn, we all grow, we all are inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Generationally Speaking. Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I want to welcome you to Generationally Speaking, aka Miss Irene for my young peeps.
There you go.
I am so excited to always bring to the table the journey of persons that I know that will enhance your life. You never know who you are amongst. And this is a young man that I had the opportunity to grow up with, but God has blessed him. He's been interviewed by Oprah. He's been on the O'Reilly Factor. You know you got to be a strong mind to be on that one, okay, y'all?
I kicked his behind.
He's been on Fox News, C-SPAN, many marketplace discussions, and just recently he's telling me he just finished up an interview about one of his great heroes. I'm not going to tell you who that is. I'm going to let him share that with you. And so let me welcome to you, my audience, Mr. Thomas Dortch Jr. Welcome, Mr. Dortch.
Well, it's good to be with you, Miss Irene. Reverend Smith, it's great to see you again. And I tell you, we both had a great journey, and happy to be able to sit down with you.
Well, you know, it is just awesome to see how God elevates. And when I look at your life, I can see now that God has elevated you from the small town in Toccoa. So talk to our audience a little bit about how your early years, your formative years, your years in your community has shaped you to have this mantra, I will give out before I give up. Now, how did the community and your parents help shape that mantra of yours?
I tell you, well, growing up in below Toccoa, Georgia, it's about 100 miles north of Atlanta, northeast of Atlanta. I was in the last segregated high school class to graduate from my school. But being there, and one of the things that blessed me was, one, having a community. When we talk about village, we really had a village because all of the adults in the community worked and wrapped their arms around all of the children, no matter what your economic status, no matter who your parents were. We were all children of the community. And at the time, we were only 10% of the population then. But growing up then, I saw the signs that said for coloreds only. They weren't letting people go in the front door of their restaurants and all. But my father and the other business owners and the minister and the principals in my hometown, they taught us, you don't need to go where you're not wanted. You have your own. And if you don't have it, you make your own. And so, and the other thing that stuck was that they always said to us, it's those people who are sick, not you. You're God's children, and God does not make mistakes. And that's why, even to this day, I'm still very spiritual. But I grew up watching how politics work. You know, even though we were only 10%, my dad and the business owners and the funeral director and the preachers, they all came together, and they would decide who they were going to vote for in an election. And you can imagine most of those candidates, the white candidates, were pretty much on par. That's when I first saw the importance of unity and what we call really black power. 10% ain't that small when it's collected. And so whoever they voted for won the election. I saw that all growing up. And the funny part, when those restaurants wanted us to come in the back door, my dad had the mayor coming in the back door, the sheriff coming in the back door, and they'd have meetings. And so I saw what politics and what economics can do. And in high school, the majority of all my teachers were HBCU graduates, Historic Black College University graduates. And they always told us, you got to perform as excellence without excuse. And when our principals would order new books, they send the new books over to the white high school and send us their used books. That's until we got this one principal who came from Chicago. He was something else. But the teachers told us, they said, look, even if your page may be torn or tattered, that little tape, that light tape, you can see through it. And the same thing you're reading in those books here is the same thing your white counterparts are reading. Don't complain. Just put forth your best, be the best. And that's what we grew up with. I was all-state basketball in high school, but we competed academically. I missed being valedictorian to one of my closest friends by 0.2 percentage points. I didn't complain. We were happy because we all encouraged each other. I was student government president my junior and senior year in high school. They elected an underclassman. I played in the band. I sang in the glee club. So I did all of those things because we had all that we wanted, all that we needed, and we didn't have to go to the white community for it. They taught us self-sufficiency and self-sustainability and what you can do when you put your resources together. And then the other good part, I had phenomenal parents. My father was an entrepreneur. He owned restaurants all up and down the East Coast. But my mother at the time, we called her a domestic worker. She would take care of us, and she would take care of the lawyer and Ramsey and all of their children. And they loved her to death. I mean, they would come to our home. We played with them. The other good thing about growing up, as we start from that one area, because I remember my childhood so well. We were on one side, and there was a little creek in the back up there in North Georgia. The other side was white folks. We would play football together with the white kids. We played basketball together. We played baseball together. If there were fights, it was my team against your team. Nobody had taught us to hate because of the color of our skin. So I grew up understanding that. And so we were okay. So we didn't look at white folks as being superior, and we didn't look at them as being bad, not the kids. See, children aren't born bad. They learn bad behaviors from adults. And that's what we're dealing with now when you look at all this mess today. The other thing about growing up in Toccoa, I knew a lot of white folks who were friends of my family. They come to the house and talk to this day. The Ramseys and Struble families, they all became judges. And we still communicate. And their children, we still communicate. And growing up, one last piece that helped me, then the way my children, everybody, my mother had what was called house rules. She said, I don't care who your friends' parents are. I don't care where they live. I don't care about any of that. They have to understand when they're in your home, they live by house rules. No fussing, no cursing, no fighting. And we grew up with the value system that if we had and our friends came and did not have, we knew we were going to lose clothes. They were going to take, my mother's going to give away clothes or give away shoes or give them money to go buy something. And that's the way I raised my children, the same way. I mean, I don't judge children by their parents. You know, it's your actions when you're with us. And so growing up in Toccoa, I learned a lot. I remember in high school, my senior year, we were on a bus going to play in a basketball tournament. We had to go through Forsyth County. And there was a sign on a fence. We were in the bus. And it said, and I quote, "Nigga, don't let the sun set on your black behind."
That's right.
That was, again, in 1967. And so I remember that because later in my career, I was sitting in Forsyth County. I'll talk about that later when I was with U.S. Senator Sam Nunn, where I was sitting in the back room with these commissioners asking me for advice. And it was amazing. That was right after my other good hero, Hosea Williams, had led a march up in Forsyth County. Because in Forsyth County, people don't know the history. They took all of the land from black folks and ran them out. And Forsyth County was at one point all white county. And when they went up in March, I can just might as well keep it connected. When they went up to March, they were stoned and bottles were thrown at them. And they came back to Atlanta and organized a big march to go back. And they projected over 250,000 people showed up, including the mayor of Boston, U.S. Senator Sam Nunn went up, and I was his state director. I'm the first African-American state director ever for any U.S. Senator. We went up, the FBI and Secret Service and the Georgia State Patrol stopped us because we had an escort. They stopped us right outside. We all had to put on flak jackets because they said there was a death threat against Senator Nunn. He didn't turn back. And we went in, we met with those, we're in the back room, and these folks were terrified. And I was happy they were terrified because they did nothing about what happened to our people when they came in, because you should have freedom to move anywhere in this country. And so we were in the back room. I gave them advice on things they needed to do. They kept asking. The more they asked, and I tell them, and they kept asking. I said, this is ironic. I came through this county as a senior in high school with that sign, and I still never forgot.
On that point, thinking about how you graduated from a segregated high school or school, period, and then went to an HBCU, how do you think that refined your voice to speak up and speak out for people? Because not everybody feels empowered to speak.
I know.
Some people are afraid to speak.
Right.
And some people say, I don't know what to say. So how did it refine your voice as a young man who found himself speaking up for the disenfranchised?
Well, it was an easy transition because, one, my teachers had already kind of talked to me about HBCUs, and I looked and I admired them. As a matter of fact, my high school basketball coach, who coached me up until my senior year, was from Fort Valley. Okay. My senior year coach was a FAMU graduate, Bobby Boatwright. I remember him. And we only lost 3 games in my last 2 years in high school. But they kind of prepared me about college life and all. And I went down. I used to go down because my brother went there before me. Okay. He's 2 years older than me. And several from my hometown that go. So I used to go down and hang out on Fort Valley's campus and all. So going down, I saw these upperclassmen my freshman year. And the one thing, and before I went there, because I scored the second highest score on the Air Force officers exam, and was thinking about going into the Air Force, but that was right during the Vietnam War. And my coach came all the way back up from the previous year and talked to me, and my teachers and everybody pulled me aside and they said, son, you may get in there, you may become an officer, you'll be flying planes in Vietnam, I guarantee you. And I thought about it. They said, with your brain, why do you want to go in the military when you can go to college and own a scholarship? And so I went down to Fort Valley this summer before I started that fall because I made the East-West All-Star game. And so we all played the All-Star game on that campus. And Lord Neal, who's one of my friends who played, he went to Tennessee State, was drafted by the Portland Trailblazers. But anyway, Fort Valley, the upperclassmen, they demonstrated on everything. And when I was there, and I'd sit in on the meeting, they let us freshmen in there, but the one thing they told us, we're going to go take over. I remember they were going to take over the dining hall with a list of demands. But they said to us freshmen, we don't want you in there because you may get sent home. They're stricter, but us upperclassmen will do it. We don't want you in there. They had demands because we had foreign teachers who you couldn't understand what they were saying. We weren't against them for their race, is the students couldn't understand them. And so that was one of the demands. They had a demand that these rations you get for meals, we're growing young men and women, we need more food. They had curfews on the upper class women. They had to be in their dorms by 10. And so there were all kinds of things. So they took the list of demands and we didn't go. They went in and locked themselves in the dining hall, and we sat there, and they said, look, when we go in there, we're not touching anything. We're going to just lock ourselves in. There was this big football player who was about 400 pounds. His name, the coach named him Crying Shame. And the reason why he got his name, the coach said, son, get down there and give me some push-ups. How many can you do? He said 1. Coach thought he was joking. He said, well, get down and give me some push-ups. He could only do 1, and the coach called him Crying Shame, and from that day on, that was his name. When they went in the dining hall, he went straight to the kitchen, got him some food. Nobody was going to tell him he couldn't do it. But we watched them and they changed things. And so the end of my junior year, I stayed actively involved. I ran and I was elected student government president at Fort Valley. My goal was to register our students to vote.
Okay.
Because in that city, there was only one African-American elected official in a 57% African-American county. And the city was about 60%. I registered 96% of all the students on my campus to vote. And the good thing, we were kicking up so much noise down there. John Lewis came down to visit us. He was the president of the Voter Education Project at the time. Julian Bond, who became like a big brother to me, he came down. Lonnie King came down. I had, you name them, I had them on my campus as SGA president because we had what they call the Lyceum features. But the way I had to get them in there, the students weren't coming to student assembly. So when I had flyers under every door in the dorms and sent out posted notices, there would be no more concerts until students showed up for a student body assembly. And I went, because I was very close. I pledged to Omega. I got several of the big football players to be my sergeant at arms. And I told them, if anybody come in here with any mess, you shut it down. I didn't have any more trouble because when these folks saw him and they were standing by, I said, I don't need this guy. But what we were able to do to get the students registered, and then come election day, there were two pacts we made. We would not run for public office. We would support the local citizens. We created a Citizens and Students Committee for a better community. And then the other thing that we said was we were going to be orderly. So the day before the election, we were going to march down double file and vote. They didn't put a precinct on our campus. Little did we know that evening before, when I had everybody assembled, we gave instructions. The white citizens had said we were going to have a riot in that city. And they had sent the GBI down and all of them. They sent black GBI officers. They were actually in the crowd. So little did we know they were there. And after I got through giving instructions, the one of the top guys who was African American came up to me. He said, Mr. Dortch, I'm so proud of you and how organized your student body is. He said, we were sent down here to do the advanced work on whether there was going to be a demonstration or riot. He said, I've already called in and said, I want all of you students to know we'll be there to protect you. We're going to be with you all the way. I've already talked to the commanders, and they know that nobody's going to harm any one of you. That was so big and so huge, but it also says having black people in the right places is so important and so critical as we look at the challenges we have today. But from that, we went down, we elected, eventually the city council, we elected predominantly African American. The Utilities Commission, which controlled all the money, predominantly African American. And we got predominantly African American county commission. And the next year after I graduated, we got our first black mayor in Fort Valley. And the spring of that year, now this is ironic, we did all of this, and in the spring of that year, they were having the Democratic caucus. That was the year Shirley Chisholm was running for president. And so Julian called me, and John, they said, we want you to run. Lonnie King was the one who stayed on top of it. Said, we want you to run for a delegate seat supporting Shirley Chisholm. Well, these guys thought I could do it. I said, sure, I'll do it. The caucuses were usually in Macon, because Macon is Middle Georgia, 3rd Congressional District. Zell Miller was the executive director of the Democratic Party. They moved it from Macon to Americus, Georgia, 10 miles from Plains, which was Jimmy Carter's home. The other thing I didn't know, they said, fill out the papers, we'll do the rest and tell you who you're running against. On front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the next day, student at Fort Valley, student government president Fort Valley running against Jimmy Carter for a delegate seat to the Democratic National Convention. Well, I wasn't afraid. I said, if they think I can do it, let's go. And ironically, we couldn't charter Trailway Greyhound buses. They said they were all booked up. So we chartered church buses. We paid for the college bus so that there was no trouble with the college.
Right.
And we moseyed on over to Americus, Georgia.
Wow.
Zell didn't say that candidates got to speak. When we got there, they had finished all the speeches, so I didn't get to speak. But my team that came, they spread it out in the audience. Students were there from Columbus State and everywhere else because it's right up the road. Do you know Jimmy Carter, the sitting governor of Georgia, only beat me by 15 votes? And I had one bus, church bus, that broke down 15 miles out of Americus. If that bus would not have broken down, we would have defeated Jimmy Carter. I'm so happy that bus broke down, though, because he went on to become president. Right. I went on to become associate director of the Democratic Party. When I first graduated, Jimmy Carter hired me. I was a community development consultant and in graduate school. And so I worked doing the community development consulting work in graduate school. And Julian and those said, look, we got a guy running for governor. He's a great guy. We want you to meet him. Jimmy Carter's people wanted me to meet Burt Lance. They wanted me to support Burt. And they said, you'll have a job if Burt wins or lose. They sent people to talk to me for Burt. George Busby came and talked to me. That impressed me so much. I went to work in his campaign and was one of his deputies. I didn't charge him one penny. I just did it because it was the right thing to do, good people. And we became great friends. And then after that, I was co-chair of the Amendment 2, because at that time, a governor could only run one term. Me and Robin Harris, who was the president of Decatur Federal, were co-chairs. We passed it in every county in Georgia that allowed the governor to succeed himself. And then when we went on, Jimmy Carter became chair of the Senate Democratic Reelection Committee, got well known, ran for president. I helped to put together some of his campaign offices in the southern region. And I thought, he was a caring president. But all of that from college, from watching my students and that's one of the things I've done all along the way is gone into HBCU campuses, helped to generate new leaders. People like Melanie Campbell was one of my mentees and students who's headed up the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. She was a student at Clark. I've had students to work in the White House. I've got students who are elected officials. I mean, all of those things, when I look back, is that it's about the body of work you learn from your elders.
So hearing about all these different lives that you've sown into, you have experienced an opportunity that some only dream of. And that is, you've had great mentors. You talked about John Lewis. You talked about Julian Bond. You talked about so many civil rights giants who they tapped you and they've sowed into you. Being seated with them, what are the life lessons that you've learned from them that you can share with others who might be listening in right now?
Well, the first impressive thing to me is that these people had to come in touch. They were making history, doing things. Julian Bond, they tried to nominate him for vice president in Chicago, but he was too young. He wasn't old enough. These individuals were committed to our community, committed to our people, committed to make sure future generations had a better life. But they joked. Andy Young could be a stand-up comedian. And they tell me Dr. King was the same way. But they were common people with uncommon valor and commitment. And so that helped me. The late John Dale Johnson was the executive director of the NAACP here in Atlanta. Phenomenal lady. They tapped me as their youth director when I came in here, because I was at graduate school, but John and Julian and Lenny King and all them had told her about me, and she sought me out. And I figured my mentor said, you ought to be doing it. I did it. And so I was the youth director for the Atlanta NAACP. And by the way, the NAACP got kicked out at the Atlanta chapter because they also elected me on the board. And we voted, instead of taking up an old lawsuit that we had filed against the Atlanta public school system. We weren't including busing anymore. How are you going to bus in an 85 to 90% black school district? So we decided we wanted to integrate the administration. We wanted a black superintendent of public schools and top executives. And so that's what we settled in the lawsuit. And so Ben, who was the executive director of the NAACP National then, they decided to remove everybody on the board, and they appointed me, Jarvis Greer, John L. Johnson. There were 2 of us, 5 of us were appointed to reorganize the Atlanta branch of the NAACP. I agreed they did the right thing. I think Ben just decided since they didn't follow the directive from the national, they were going to set an example. But Jandel was phenomenal. She was a mentor. That lady she would walk in, and I don't care how tall you may have been, how big, she stand toe to toe with you. So I learned a lot from Jandel Johnson. And as I said, C.T. Vivian and Hank Aaron and Joseph Lowry and Ambassador Andrew Young and Zenona Clayton, all of them living right in my neighborhood. And I got to know Mrs. Coretta Scott King. Daddy King and I got to know Daddy King.
Wow.
Daddy King was another one of those comedians. I guess you had to have a sense of humor to go through a lot of what they dealt with. And so all of them, I never had the opportunity to meet Dr. King personally. He was assassinated on the night of my senior class trip to Washington, D.C. He was in Tennessee, and that was one of the other dreams. But I've been among black royalty in this city, and what we have to do is.
But you were tapped.
Yeah, I was tapped. I mean, but the young people have to understand the reason why I was tapped was that they saw my commitment early.
Okay.
They saw my commitment to volunteer. They saw my body of work trying to move my colleagues to get us engaged. And I think that's a lot of how the civil rights movement, they tap leaders. Like John was part of SNCC, him and the late Ben Brown and the late Julian Bond and Leonard King, all of them started SNCC. And Dr. King brought them in. And the Freedom Riders were mainly students from HBCUs and other college campuses. And so when they brought me in, I delivered. And I tell folks I'm a servant leader. The first term, I was elected 10 years as a chair of 100 Black men in America. And people couldn't believe as chairman, I'd be in the room with my staff and volunteers helping to unpack boxes and helping to kind of help them do the work. Because I said, in order to lead, you also got to be a follower. And you have to lead by example.